Alright, people. Time to cover something a little more domestic. So this is from Reason.com. And what we're looking at is the same FBI that wants to destroy encryption is still illegally snooping on Americans. Years after surveillance reforms, federal personnel can't seem to comply with the Fourth Amendment. Yeah, I mean, this current modern-day government doesn't even care about the Constitution anymore. They openly defy it on a regular basis. Every decade, it seems like there's at least one violation. And remember the Patriot Act? But as late as last year, against agents at the FBI were still violating the privacy rights of American citizens through misuse of federal surveillance tools. A ruling from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, or FISC, has revealed. The ruling is from October 2018, but was only declassified and disclosed this week, albeit in a heavily redacted format, in the process of analyzing and reauthorizing the FBI's ability to engage in warrantless domestic surveillance under Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. FISC Judge James Boasberg determined that on multiple occasions, FBI personnel were not properly restricting their searches and thereby violated the Fourth Amendment rights of American citizens. This is why I use places like DuckDuckGo and always have a VPN handy. This is the reason. I don't care so much about like big companies selling my data to China. I'm worried about this. The misuse of Section 702 surveillance authorities was widely exposed by whistleblower Edward Snowden, who alerted Americans in the world that our government was collecting and storing massive amounts of private data about millions of people without warrants or probable cause, violating everyone's privacy in the name of allegedly tracking down terrorism. Eventually, Congress passed reforms requiring the FBI to be more specific about its use of search terms in order to look through and access phone and internet data collected domestically. They had to make sure they were confining their snooping for evidence of criminal activity or information about targets of foreign surveillance. They were no longer supposed to collect and hold massive amounts of U.S. citizen metadata and engage in phishing expeditions among millions and millions of call and internet records, looking for matches on vague terms. They were now expecting to request data being held by telecoms under more specific language, all intended to make sure they were not accessing data that was unrelated to any crime or terrorism investigation. Now, the government and the FBI would say, well, if you're not engaged in illegal activity, then you've got nothing to hide. So you have nothing to worry about. Oh, I think we do. I think we do. Any government that has the power to investigate its own citizen in this manner could easily abuse it in order to oppress them. This opens the door wide open to tyranny and rights violations like never before in this country. You could literally investigate anyone for anything, you get a little dirt on them, and you could use that as a weapon. You could blackmail, you could arrest them for non-crimes, and by non-crimes I mean things that are not morally wrong, but are considered illegal. Keep in mind that the law does not determine what is right. The ideal relationship between morality and the law is that morality should determine the laws, not laws determining morality. To have the law determine what is right is completely backwards. It really needs to be the other way around. Keep in mind, slavery was legal. The execution of the Jews in Germany was legal. Law never determines what's right, my friends. Never. It should be the other way around. So this could easily be used as a weapon against the people of the United States. Easily. But according to Boasberg, or Bosberg, according to his ruling, FBI employees on multiple occasions did not properly follow the rules and were able to query and access data that they aren't allowed to see. They were able to do this because the data querying process did not require FBI personnel to prove that the search terms they used were intended to seek information connected to a crime of foreign intelligence information. As a result, agents conducted numerous illegal searches on a single day in December 2017. For instance, the FBI used social security numbers of nearly 7,000 searches of the National Security Agency NSA database on another occasion. FBI personnel ran searches for improper personal reasons, One contractor searched for information about himself, other employees, and family members in February 2018. FBI personnel improperly performed dozens of queries to get information about potential sources, not targets of an investigation. Despite the passage of legal restrictions that are supposed to prevent the illegal use of Americans' data, it's still happening, and it appears that many FBI employees either do not understand or do not care that they can't just go around looking at our private data in his ruling. Bosberg notes the government acknowledges that such queries generally results from fundamental misunderstandings by some FBI personnel about what the standard reasonably likely to return foreign intelligence information means. This all tracks some observations from Snowden's new book, in which he recounts witnessing little oversight to make sure personnel were not abusing their surveillance authority. In August, the FBI amended its querying procedures to make sure that personnel properly differentiate between queries involving U.S. citizens and other queries, and to make sure that the search terms are reasonably likely to retrieve foreign intelligence information or evidence of a crime prior to reviewing the contents returned by such a query. This is true to form for most law enforcement in the United States. There is a definite lack of discipline. There is a very lax approach to what is considered standards and good standards and practices. Officers of the law frequently get away with violating their own rules for conduct because they are either undisciplined or they are corrupt. Why should the FBI any different? Just because they're federal, of course. It's partly because they're not properly trained, so they lack discipline, and that also leads to corruption. They need better law enforcement training in this country. They need to make sweeping reforms in order to fix the situation. Otherwise, you're just going to keep seeing more and more of this as time goes on. At the same time, the Department of Justice is trying to stop Facebook from implementing end-to-end encryption across its messaging services, including WhatsApp, unless it includes some form of backdoor so that the government can bypass and access the data. Also, the agenda of the Five Eyes Alliance, which is the major foreign surveillance agencies of the five biggest countries. I don't remember who all is in it, but I know the United States is in there, England is in there, you got MI6 in there, MI6, CIA, in the Five Eyes. They also want backdoors put into shit. Attorney General William Barr, joined by his counterparts in the United Kingdom and Australian government, has sent a letter urging Facebook against implementing encryption that would lock out law enforcement opening, as they have all this time that encryption will make it harder for them to gather the evidence necessary to arrest and convict criminals. And by criminals, they can lean heavily, almost exclusively, on child predators, the letter argues. Our understanding is that much of this activity, which is critical to protecting children and fighting terrorism, no longer be possible if Facebook implements its proposals as planned. The U.S. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimates that 70% of Facebook's reporting, 12 million reports globally, would be lost. This would significantly increase the risk of child sexual exploitation or other serious harms. You said yourself that we face an inherent trade-off because we will never find all the potential harm we do today. When our security systems can see the messages themselves, while this trade-off has not been quantified, we are very concerned that the right balance is not being struck, which would make your platform an unsafe space, including for children. We should be wary when the government presents the worst-case crime scenario in an attempt to weaken our right to privacy. There is no such thing as a tool that would allow only the United States, the United Kingdom, or Australia to bypass encryption solely for the purpose of being abused, children. Any such backdoor could also fall into the hands of Russian or North Korean hackers, the Chinese government, or a Middle Eastern authoritarian government, all of whom would likely use the tool to cause chaos and persecute dissidents. Exactly. This is a big problem. Now, I would want to address the problem by providing an actual solution in good faith, but the truth is, I don't necessarily know what to say about this as a solution to the issue of how that could be, abused. So how do you avoid, do what they want to do without having a backdoor? And to be honest, I can't tell you. I honestly can't tell you. But really, do you really want to run the risk, nonetheless, of inviting Big Brother to come through there? Or foreign enemies? And I know some people will characterize that as fear-mongering, but trust me. If you hear bushes rustling and assume it's a tiger and you're right, then you have a chance to survive. And if you're wrong, you're still alive. If you assume it's just the wind and it turns out to be a tiger, you're dead. If we use this as a philosophical metaphor, then fear-mongering is a good idea, because it's going to keep you alive. And if you're wrong, well, But to finish this article off, and with this news from the FISC, we now know that our own government still can't be trusted to use its surveillance powers responsibly or legally. FBI employees still cannot keep from helping themselves to American citizens' private data. We should be equally concerned about random American, British, and Australian government officials accessing our private data secretly. They've made it abundantly clear that they want to. Privacy and tech freedom organizations around the world sent a letter in response to Facebook encouraging them in no uncertain terms to stick with the plan for end-to-end encryption and begging them to resist calls to create so-called backdoors or exceptional access to the content of users' messages, which will fundamentally weaken encryption and the privacy and security of all users. There are organizations, not just in the United States, like the American Civil Liberties Union and Americans for Prosperity, but organizations also in places like the Philippines and Uganda, where human liberty is severely restricted. The United States government has shown repeatedly that it cannot be trusted to protect citizen privacy, and hand-wringing about child predators simply doesn't change the circumstances here. Facebook should push forward and tell Barr to go get his own house in order first. I have a question for the FBI. What child predators? Where are they? How do we know this isn't sort of their version of what the military-industrial complex does and create threats to justify their activities? I think that would be pretty true to form for this government. Anyway, peace!